with your host, the radio chick, Annie Ubellis. Join Annie on Tuesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with an open chat room full of her regulars. And yes, you can even call in. Call 917-889-3675. That's 917-889-3675 to be a part of the action on the phone line. Not able to listen live? Not a problem. You can always catch Annie, the radio chick, and Southern Sense Talk Radio podcasts in archives at southern-sense.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Southern Sense the right way.
Good afternoon, and welcome here to Southern Sense here on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, the Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, half a dozen different places. Just go to our website, which is the name of the show, Southern Sense, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick, Annie, along with my debonair and oh-so-sophisticated co-host, Curtis C.S. Bennett. Good afternoon, Curtis.
Well, how are you today, Annie?
A little hectic, a little rushed. Unfortunately, my husband took a fall. He broke his hip, and he's in the hospital. So I've been running back and forth with like a chicken with its head cut off. Oh, man, it's a bitch getting old, I tell you that. But
I've been recuperating all weekend from I guess respiratory virus or something like that, but I'm back to about 96%.
That is good. That is so good. We've got a great show, a special show here today. We've got two fellow BTR hosts as our guest. We've got Kel Fritzy of Red Fox and Tim Burton of the not the EDL. Oh, good Lord. I just had a major brain fart. LibertyGB.org.k. LibertyGB is out of the United Kingdom, and it's a conservative party, and lots of little things going on that we're going to be talking about. But we've got so much more to talk about today with everything that's been going on, the disaster of that truck over in Berlin. You've got the Turkey ambassador that was assassinated. And it's like the closer you get to Christmas, the more the nuts come out of the woodwork. So, we're ready. All right. Before we do go into the regular show, everyone out there listening knows that we start each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And today is no different. Today's dedication is going out to Police Officer Cody Brotherson of West Valley City Police Department, Utah. His end of watch was on Sunday, November 6th of this year. And this is from...
I'm American made.
Whoa. That was not what I wanted to click on. Sorry about that. Let's try this and see if we get it correct here. All right. And this is from the Salt Lake Tribune. About the makeshift processional at the scene where 20 police cars followed the hearse to the state medical examiner's office. Russo said this man gave his life, so we honor him and this community honors that. It devastates us. That is the bottom line. We are a family. A little after 3 a.m., officers observed a silver BMW coupe with Florida plates that they deemed suspicious. They saw three males walking from the car to the Boulder Pines apartment complex and watched as the trio stole a vehicle. The officers tried to stop that vehicle, but the driver punched it, heading west. Officers threw tire spikes near Redwood Road, but that didn't stop the suspects. It appears that Brotherson, who pulled his car over, was attempting to lay down another set of tire spikes when the suspect's car hit him. The chase lasted less than a minute. Brotherson died at the scene, roughly 50 yards west of his police car. The suspect's vehicle was run off the road and became disabled, Russo said. The three men ran and were later arrested apparently without injury. They all were under 18 years old. Unified Police Department is leading the investigation. Russo said it wasn't clear if the suspects intentionally hit Brotherson. He added that it was premature to release any information about whom they are or what charges they may face. He said he has brought in counselors and the department's peer support team. He also said he has heard from police chiefs throughout the state. My phone has been ringing up all morning with just about every police chief here in the valley, and even outside, expressing their condolences and offering their support, he said. Jeremy Brotherson, Brotherson's mother, Jenny Brotherson, Brotherson's mother, described her son as someone with a loyal heart who would do anything for those he loved. Our amazing and beautiful son, brother, nephew, friend, and boyfriend wanted to be a police officer his entire life, Jenny said, as she stood outside the family home in West Valley City, surrounded by officers' loved ones. That dream was realized 3 years ago, but was cut short this morning. She said the family is proud of what Brotherson did with his life and thanked the West Valley City Police Department and its officers for their support. As a family, we ask that when you see a police officer, you give him the support and respect that they deserve, Jenny Brotherson said. As news of the officer's death spread, condolences were also tweeted by police departments across the state. After a week of emotional tributes and heartfelt memorials, West Valley Police Officer Cody Brotherson was laid to rest at Valley View Memorial Park in West Valley City. He sacrificed his life for what he believed in and what he loved, said West Valley Police Chief Lee Russo. Brotherson was killed early in the morning on Sunday, November 6th, as he was hit by a stolen car while laying out spikes. On that morning, Cody was trying to protect a community. He was fighting crime. He was trying to arrest offenders. And when the moment came, he stood strong. He didn't waver. He didn't run away, said Russo. His sacrifice resonated across the country. It doesn't matter what patch we have on our shoulder. We're all the same, brothers and sisters throughout and through, said Officer Thomas Pod from NYPD. Sue Hilburn of West Valley City was one of the many residents who stood alongside the road as the funeral procession for Officer Brotherson passed on. I wanted to let them know they meant a lot to me, Hilburn said. With a full-size American flag and pole in hand, Hilburn stood alongside the road for the funeral procession in West Valley for over an hour. My legs do hurt, Hilburn added, but she hardly showed it. She stood motionless, with the flag raised while the procession rolled by. Even after the last car passed, Hilburn stood with the flag raised for another 10 minutes while firefighter teams took down a giant American flag that hung across 4100 S. Today I came out partly for them and their funeral and their families, Hilburn said. But mostly I came out because I'm a new resident in this community and I wanted to participate in this community and this country. The last call is a tradition at law enforcement funerals. It is the last time dispatch calls for the officer. Officer 444, we show you now 1042 for the last time. It has been a pleasure and a blessing, said a dispatcher as part of Officer Brotherson's last call. Today's show is dedicated to Officer Cody Brotherson. It is also dedicated to all the brave men and women out there as first responders who every day strap on their uniform and equipment and protect and serve. It is also dedicated to our brave military, those that have served, who are serving, and will serve. God bless them all, and we dedicate this song, Last Call, by Dave Bray. Is this Tim?
Yes, it is. How are you?
A little crazy, a little nuts. My husband is in the hospital. He broke his hip, and they replaced it last night. So I rushed from the hospital to get here and to do the show. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, absolutely. And I'm sorry to hear about your husband, and certainly please pass on my good wishes and hope he gets better, certainly in time for Christmas. Do you think he'll be home for Christmas? I mean, I don't know what kind of, injury it might be, but a hip break sounds quite serious.
Yeah, it is. I'm hoping he will be, but we'll find out more. So we're waiting for the doctor to stop by and talk to him. But I'm going to put you on mute for now, and when the dedication song is over, we'll start, okay?
Yeah, that sounds absolutely fine.
All right. And
looking forward to it.
Kel was on the phone with me, helping me to decompress last night for about an hour. So I don't think she wants to talk to me anymore.
Yes.
All right.
Nah, she's a little superstar, isn't she, Arkell?
Oh, yes, she is. All right. See you on the other side.
Yes.
That's Last Call by Dave Bray, and you can go to his website, Dave Bray USA. Check it out. And we're back. You're here listening to Southern Sense here on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, the Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina. And you know the rest of what I'm going to say. Just go to our website, put a hyphen in the middle, southern-sense.com, and check out all the players and everything else on the website. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick Annie, along with my co-host Curtis C.S. Bennett. And Curtis, I told you before, we got ourselves a really great show lined up, and our guests are here, rocking and ready to go. Are you ready? Is the listeners ready?
I'm quite ready, and I'm very ready.
All right. Let's bring on Tim Burton and Kel Fritzy. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon, Annie. It's great to be here. Lovely to see you. Is Kel there in the background? Is that the dulcet tones of Foxy?
I'm right here. Hi, Tim. Hi, Annie. Hi,
Hi, Kel.
Hey, Kel.
We got ourselves a great show because you've got a great story to tell us. Matter of fact, just before I left my husband this afternoon, he was going, "Who's your guest?" And I told him about you, Tim, and his eyes are looking at me like, "What? You mean someone really wants to inhibit my free speech and my religious freedom and everything? Really? And someone doesn't have a sense of humor? Someone doesn't have a sense of humor out there? There are people like that in the world?"
So.
Well, Tim, tell us about yourself. A little bit of your background. What do you do, and how did you get all messed up with Liberty GB?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I suppose for a long time, ever since 9/11, I've been interested in what it is that drives people to do the terrible things that they do in the name of religion. And what I found as I researched more and more was that there was one particular ideology, that is to say Islam, that seemed to be associated with an awful lot of this. And the more I looked into Islam, the more I realized that it was the ideology itself that's the problem. People frequently refer to radical Muslims, radical Islamists, as opposed to moderate Muslims, but my research led me to believe, in fact, there's no difference. So the ideology is the guiding force behind all these terrible things that happen, and there's no such thing as as radical Islam versus moderate Islam at all. There may well be Muslims who don't subscribe to all the terror and the mayhem that is caused by Islam, but in reality you could say that they aren't true Muslims at all, because Islam is quite distinct and clear on the subject that you must wage war on the kuffar if you're going to be a devout Muslim, and there's no getting away from it. It runs through the Quran and the Hadith like a stick of rock. So the more I looked at this, the more I realised that nobody on the British political scene was talking about it at all, with possibly the exception of back in 2009, the English Defence League. They were pretty much the only people who were saying anything about it, and not being racist about it. They were very matter of fact. Islam is the problem. And they were being castigated and demonised for saying that. And indeed, their leader at the time, Tommy Robinson, is still being castigated and demonised even to this day. I mean, that's a complete show in itself to talk about that. But when I heard of the party, the political party Liberty GB, what they were saying in their manifesto seemed to chime with everything that I had learnt about Islam, and so I joined up and became a member of Liberty GB back in back in 2013. And it was not long after that when I run into a little bit of trouble with a gentleman called Fiaz Magal, who runs an organisation over here in the UK called Tell Mama UK. And Tell Mama UK, on the face of it, measures anti-Muslim attacks. And the idea is to present all these poor little Muslims having nasty things said to them. Tell Mama takes all the details and then passes them on to the police so the police can bring prosecutions. All very laudable, you might think. But in fact, what we discovered was that Tell Mama and Fiaz Magal's organisation was actively manipulating the figures in order to make things much worse, or seem much worse than they actually were. And this was actually highlighted in a newspaper article back in the summer of 2013, whereby an investigative journalist detailed exactly what Tell Mama were up to, and as a result, they lost their funding from the government, because this was all government funded to the tune of £200,000 or £300,000, about $500,000 every year. And when I read about this, I was absolutely appalled that somebody like Fiaz Magal would be allowed to run an organisation in that manner and receive all this public money and misrepresent the true state of affairs in this country concerning, concerning Muslims and Islam. And so I wrote about it. And Fiaz Magal wasn't very happy. He had me arrested, charged and prosecuted with racially aggravated harassment, and that came to court in 2014, and I won my case. Fiaz Magal wasn't very happy about that, but I thought, well, at least it's all been highlighted and I've been vindicated, and presumably Fiaz Magal, he's had his he's had his funding withdrawn, and that maybe will be the last we'll hear of him. But what I found was, over the course of the next couple of years or so, was that his organisation was still carrying on much in much in the way that it had been, and that the funding had quietly been restarted, and that for this financial year alone he was receiving the best part of £200,000, which is, I don't know, $300,000, something like that. And I felt pretty disgusted by this, and then I saw an advertisement, and an advertisement was on Tell Mama's website, and they were recruiting for some extra caseworkers, and the idea was that these caseworkers would interview any Muslim they could get hold of who might have a grievance, and they would take that grievance and they would present it in the worst possible light in order to get some action out of the local police force to chase up the perpetrators. Hence my phrase, which went round the world like wildfire back in 2013, is that Tell Mama are actually a bunch of mendacious grievance-mongering takia artists. And that was one of the phrases that Fiaz Magal objected to, because he felt it cast him in a bad light. Well, okay, it cast him in a bad light, but then the things that he'd done, I felt, deserved that kind of treatment. So anyway, when I saw this advertisement, I thought... First thing I thought was, well, Tell Mama's doing quite enough damage on their own without recruiting extra people. And then I looked at the job description and I thought, oh, I could do that. So I put in a spoof job application, and let's just say that things went downhill from there, because Tell Mama were not impressed by my attempts at humour and satire and mockery and ridicule. In fact, they don't seem to like humour, satire, mockery and ridicule at all. And they sent some very stroppy emails back to me, to which I replied in a jocular manner, as I usually do. People who know me will say I'm a cheery, cheeky chappy, not the sort of person who is taken to, writing anything offensive whatsoever. But Tell Mama didn't think this was the case, and so they got onto their friends in the Metropolitan Police in London, and they said, effectively, we don't like what Mr. Burton is doing. We want you to do something about it. So because Tell Mama is an influential organisation and Fiaz Magal is an influential Muslim, the Metropolitan Police felt they had to do something, and so they told their colleagues up in the West Midlands Police Force, which is where I live in the West Midlands. They came around and invited me into the police station for an interview, and the upshot was that I was actually charged with, this time, religiously aggravated harassment. And when I talk about the interplay between the various police forces here and Tell Mama, it's important to realise that Tell Mama have really got their feet under the table. They're very closely intertwined with our local police forces. They actually have people who go out to advise the local police forces on how to deal with so-called Islamophobia. And they also have people who sit on the Crown Prosecution Service panel, which decides how the Crown Prosecution Service is going to operate, and advises them on the same things. So, conflict of interest, anyone? It's fairly obvious to me that there is a conflict of interest, and that this case should never have been brought. But there it is. I'm charged with religiously aggravated harassment, and it's going to court on the 30th of January next year. But in the process of in the process of putting together my defence, I've actually discovered some quite quite interesting things about Islam. And before I go into that, having sort of talked the hind leg off a donkey for the last few minutes, I'll put the microphone back to you and see if you or Kel or Curtis want to ask me any questions before I go on.
All right, I'll turn the microphone over to Kel because she knows the case intimately, and I'm learning about it, so she knows the next question to ask, don't you, Kel?
I always have questions for Tim. Usually ask him what he's wearing, but not for today.
Oh, you fussy, you fussy.
You know, Tim, I have been covering this and studying this for so long now. And Fayez Magal of Tell Mama, at one point he was found out to be fraudulent. We know that, and his funding was cut, but then it was reinstated. I find that rather shocking, and I'm surprised that there aren't more people out there that are taking umbrage with this, and I am being polite now for sure. But is it just because organizations like Faith Matters and the other one he runs, Fayez Magal, he's also an organizer of Faith Matters, another Islamic Front group, I think. But organizations like Faith Matters, Tell Mama, is it just that they are getting underneath the public radar? How do we expose these frauds for what they are even more effectively than perhaps our radio programs, Tim?
Well, I suppose the answer is, I mean, first of all, when you're talking about Faith Matters, what I should have said is that Faith Matters is like the parent group of all the other little groups that Fayez Magal runs. Faith Matters runs Tell Mama as like a sub-project, one of many organisations that Fayez Magal has his sticky little fingers in. But of course, what we're seeing here is how the British establishment works when it comes to influential Muslims. They are so keen to have what they call a moderate Muslim on board doing things in order to supposedly help community cohesion, that they're willing to overlook an awful lot of unsavoury things that Tell Mama and Fayez Magal actually do. Now, when you're talking about is it possible to get more focus on what they're doing, well, yes, it certainly is, and I'm certainly hoping that this case will get a lot more publicity. The more I get an opportunity to talk about it on the various radio shows and in the various publications that I write for, the more hopefully people will become aware of what they're doing. The problem with Fayez Magal in particular is that he's extremely influential in what we call the British establishment over here, what you might call the, I don't know, you've probably got a name for it in the United States. It's the political elites that are almost untouchable until they do something absolutely terrible. Fayez Magal has got an honour pinned to his chest by Her Majesty the Queen. It's called an OBE, which is short for Order of the British Empire. And of course, when he starts throwing his weight around, people feel that they've really got to do something to placate him, because after all, he's a member of the British establishment with an OBE, and it could be career suicide to stand up to him and to say, no, you know, this is not the way we do things around here, Mr. Magal. Please cease and desist. The first person who stands up and does something like that will probably lose their job. So it's down to people like us in the counter-jihad movement to really hold their feet to the fire and say, you are not going to get away with things like this. The only trouble is that Mr. Magal is very litigious, and he doesn't, I mean, anybody else who was insulted, right, would perhaps be looking to see if they could file a civil suit for hurt feelings and things like that. But that costs money. And of course, with the connections that Mr. Magal has with the Metropolitan Police and the Crown Prosecution Service, it's much easier for him to pick up the phone and say, do something about this man, because it's not going to cost Mr. Magal a penny. On the other hand, for people like me who have to mount a defence and be represented in court, it's quite expensive. So, but the bottom line is, yes, we can bring this out in the open, and we can shed some sunlight onto what Fiaz Magal is doing. And I think that this case is actually going to backfire on him quite badly, because when it comes out in court in detail about why I did what I did, I didn't do it out of just being plain spiteful or malicious. I did it because I felt that Fiaz Magal was causing a great deal of trouble in society, and far from helping out with community cohesion, I felt he was misrepresenting the situation altogether, presenting Muslims as victims, when of course what we see is that Muslims are largely responsible for the major ills that we have in our society, and nobody is taking them to task for it, partly because of people like Fiaz Magal. So somebody has to stand up against this and speak out, and today it's us. So that's, broadly speaking, that is where we are with the specifics of the case. But as I said, once I'd started to put a defence together, what I discovered was that we were actually getting some very interesting things coming out of the woodwork concerning the status of Islam in the United Kingdom. Because we're always being told that Islam is a religion of peace, obviously, and when we in the counter-jihad movement talk about it, we say, well, no, it's not a religion of peace, and in fact, because of the political nature of Islam, it's actually wrong to talk about it as a religion at all. But in various courts of law up and down the country over the past couple of decades or so, the courts have been taking the view that indeed Islam is a religion. They've been assuming that it is. I was actually in a court about a year ago giving evidence on behalf of one of our other counter-jihadists, and we were trying to argue that Islam should not be regarded as a religion because of its overtly political nature. And the judge flat out refused to accept that article. He says, well, of course Islam is a religion, and I'm not accepting your argument. Now, that's all very well for a judge to have opinions of that nature. And of course, a lot of the legal decisions that have been made over the course of time in the UK courts, they have been made on the assumption that Islam is a religion. But there's an academic paper that's been released in the last couple of months by a chap called Graham Senior Milne. I'm sure Cal will find the reference and drop it in the chat room as we're speaking.
Sure, she did.
And that actually... Sorry, go on.
It's done.
It's done.
Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Our little superstar. Oh, dear. Anyway, I digress. We've got this academic paper, and it's actually not too difficult to read, even if you're not a lawyer. It's laid out in quite a way that's quite easy to read. And the argument goes that Islam actually conflicts with part of the European Commission of Human Rights law. Now, that's important because UK law is subordinated to ECHR law, and therefore, if there's an overriding consideration that must be taken account of in ECHR law, that has to apply to UK law. And it has to do with the criteria that Islam that have to be met before a philosophical belief can be called a religion. And some of those criteria, if you look at them closely, you can see that Islam doesn't meet those criteria. One of the things that a religion must be is worthy of respect in a democratic society, which I would take to mean must have values that do not conflict with the values of a democratic society. Another of the criteria states that a religion must not be incompatible with human dignity. Well, I think that's a moot point with Islam. But the final criteria, which is really important, is that Islam or a religion must not conflict with the fundamental rights of other people. Now, it seems to me that you couldn't argue against that. Islam does conflict with the rights of other people. Sharia law is not just for Muslims, it's for non-Muslims as well. And you can't really argue to the contrary because, excuse me, any reading of the Quran and the Hadith, and so the reliance of the traveller, the reliance of the traveller, for example, which details exactly how Sharia law should be applied. It's quite clear to see that those articles in Sharia law do apply to non-Muslims as well as Muslims. So, on the basis of the criteria, Islam doesn't meet what's required in the European Commission of Human Rights in order to qualify as a religion. Now, it's one thing asserting this and saying, I don't think Islam is a religion. And it's quite another thing to get it enshrined in English law. You've got to jump through all sorts of hoops. And one of the things you've got to do is to bring a case where that principle is important. Now, as luck would have it, my particular case where I'm
Tim, do you want to get a glass of water or something first? Because it sounds like you're choking, baby.
Oh, I don't think it's going to do me a lot of good, to be honest. I've had a bit of a sore throat for a little while, and if it gets too bad, I'll just pass the microphone back. But I just wanted to say that the way in which you get this enshrined in European law is to establish a test case, and you need to have grounds for establishing that test case. And if you're charged with religiously aggravated harassment, and you've got a defence which says, well, I shouldn't be charged with religiously aggravated harassment because Islam is not a religion, and here's why. Now, if you can get that proved in law, then that has major ramifications, as you can imagine, all over, not just for me, but for anybody who's ever been charged with a religiously aggravated crime where Islam has been concerned. So there's huge implications there. The implications are huge, not only for that, but also for the legal status of mosques, for the legal status of halal slaughter, for the legal status of Muslim marriages, for that matter. So it's a hugely important issue. Whether or not we'll get it to the point where it can be seriously debated in a court, I don't know. We're putting it forward as part of our defence. We have also got the the Equalities and Human Rights Commission interested in the case because they recognise, as we do, that the law concerning the definition of religion and belief needs to be clarified. That's something that they themselves recognise needs to be done. So when I spoke to a chap in the Equalities and Human Rights Commission last week, I explained that I'd got this case ongoing, that it was going to be, part of the defence was going to be whether or not it would be based on whether Islam was a religion or not. And they had been solicited for test cases such as mine to take this a little bit further. So I thought it was ideal. So what we're going to see next year should be very, very interesting. And that's, broadly speaking, that's the summary of where we are at the moment.
So, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Tim? First of all,
I can hear you fine.
Okay. I admire you for your courage to speak out against Islam. A lot of people have lost their lives doing so, but I commend you for doing so. But anyway, I know that one time you were campaigning in 2015, and you were assaulted by a group of Muslims. And it's the same
yes.
group that the Crown Protection Service refused to charge. Now, outside of this incident, have you been threatened by Muslims, or are you more afraid of the government in England or fatwas being put against you?
Well, I dare say, if I had gone out there and spoken in public and stood up on a podium in public and said, Islam is not fit for human consumption or something of that nature, then yes, there might be some Muslims out there who would not take kindly to what I had to say. And I did actually stand on a platform of Stop Islamisation back in 2015. That was, it was around that time that I was assaulted in the street by a group of Muslims, and the police and the Crown Prosecution Service refused to take them to court. They found out who it was, and they brought the ringleader into the police station, and they said to him, "Did you assault Mr. Burton and take his sign? My campaign materials were stolen." And the guy said, "Yeah, I did it. So what?" He says, "I did it in order that it didn't cause any more problems." And the police actually took this as a valid excuse and said to me, "We're not charging this guy because he did it because he says so that it wouldn't cause any further problems." And I said, "Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, on the one hand, you've got a clear case of assault and theft in the street, which falls under the category of street robbery, which is even more serious than plain theft on its own. On the other hand, you've got somebody who says, 'Well, I did it to avoid any more serious problems in the community.' Well, any thief could use that. If a thief was caught breaking into somebody's house and stealing their television or something like that, they could say, 'Well, I did it in order to prevent further problems.' If that guy had watched any more television, he might have flipped. I mean, I can see that argument when you look at some of the television programs we actually have over here. But nevertheless, I didn't feel it was a suitable argument that one should apply to a case as serious as street robbery. And I wrote to the Crown Prosecution Service when the police refused to charge these guys with assault or theft or street robbery, and the Crown Prosecution Service wrote back and said, "We don't think it's in the public interest to prosecute, so we're not going to." So there you go. I mean, you do have over here, you've got one law for Muslims and one law for non-Muslims, because I'm quite sure that if the boot had been on the other foot and I'd gone up to a Muslim in the street and stole his stuff, my feet wouldn't touch the ground on the way to prison. And so we've got. In fact, in many ways, I'm more afraid of the government than I am afraid of Muslims, because I'm not going to go and say Islam is this evil thing. What I'm going to do is to put it through as a defence in court, which I'm perfectly entitled to do. And really, we're going to see what the law has to say about it. This is not going to be about what Tim Burton thinks about it. It's what the UK law has to say about it when it examines the issue in detail. Now, I mentioned that there have been legal arguments or legal decisions made up and down the country for the past couple of decades based on the assumption that Islam is a religion. But that's not the same thing as actually examining the issue in court, taking all the evidence into account and coming to a conclusion based on all the evidence. That's a quite different thing. And that's really what we need to do. We need to get all the evidence in a court and argue it out so that the court can come to a conclusion and say either Islam is not a religion or Islam is a religion. And if they say it is a religion, then what they'll be doing is going against European Commission of Human Rights law, which should be, as supreme. It should be, currently UK law is subordinated to ECHR law. And so if a decision is made that Islam is a religion under those circumstances, I think many people would regard it as perverse. But of course, you've actually got to get it to the court and get the judges to actually debate the evidence or have the evidence put in front of them and then get them to make a decision. And of course, there's all sorts of things that can happen in law that might actually stop it coming to court. I mean, they could be any number of procedural details which could be thrown up as obstacles in order to stop it all happening. But what I want to do is if people who are in authority and who ought to know better, if they start throwing up these obstacles, we should be highlighting it and say, look, we're trying to do a public service here by getting clarification on the status of Islam in UK law. And this group or that group or the other group is throwing up obstacles which are stopping that argument being debated. So I think, as far as we're concerned in the counter-jihad movement, we're going to get a good outcome either way. Now, I'm not talking about my own specific circumstances, because when I actually come to court, I'm going to be tried with this specific case of harassing Fiaz Magal with what I wrote on in an email to him. I mean, personally, I don't think that a charge of harassment will stand, but that's neither here nor there. You know, if you get a Muslim judge and 12 Muslim jurors, then it doesn't matter what your arguments are, you're probably going to get convicted. But the question about Islam being a religion in UK law is much, much bigger than my personal circumstances. And if I can use my personal circumstances in order to get these arguments aired in a court of law, then I think it will be good for everybody, and that's really what I'm going to try and do. So, who do I fear most? The Muslims putting a fatwa on my head, or the British government? Oh, I'd say the British government every time.
Well, you know, up on the libertygb.org.uk website, there's an article about Paul Gooding, who is jailed over the Christmas holidays because he confronted a Cardiff hate preacher. So I'm assuming that this person happens to be a Muslim. What's the story behind that?
Well, as far as I'm aware, Paul Golding, I mean, you have to admire people like Paul Golding, because his organisation, Britain First, they actually go out of their way to get into the faces of Muslims who they see as promoting values which are sort of contrary to British values. I mean, Islam does that. The values of Islam are completely contrary to the values of our Judeo-Christian civilization, and I think it's absolutely right that you should be able to stand up and say, well, I don't agree with your values, they're completely the opposite of mine, and I have the right to say so. But what happened over the last few months, I'm not sure exactly when this was done, a court made a decision, there was a decision taken in court to bar Paul Golding from Islamic premises and from, I don't know exactly what the other terms of his banning order were, but he'd had this banning order made out against him, and when he was arrested for confronting this Cardiff hate preacher, it was decided that his activities were a breach of the banning order, and that's supposedly what he's gone to prison for. I mean, it strikes me that it's still politically motivated, but yeah, he's been put in prison. I mean, an 8-week jail sentence usually means that you're out in 4 weeks with good behaviour, because the British penal system works on the basis that they try and keep a lid on the grievances of the prisoners who are behind bars, and they do that by holding out the carrot that if you're a good boy, you can get up to 50% of your sentence knocked off, and that's a good incentive for people to behave when they're in prison. It doesn't always work. We've had riots in Birmingham prison only this week, and various tons of damage has been caused, and various prisoners have been transferred out to other facilities in the country. But by and large, that's the way it works. So Paul Golding will probably be out in 4 weeks, but yeah, he's still spending Christmas behind bars for standing up to principles that he believes in, and you know, he should be able to confront hate preachers. I think this particular hate preacher had said, if I remember rightly, that it was all right, amongst other things, that it was perfectly all right to keep sex slaves. And of course, the hate preacher is not wrong. If you look at what it says in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 3, it says that you are allowed to keep prisoners of captives of your right hand, and that effectively means sex slaves. And if it's in the Quran and it was good enough for Muhammad, so the thinking goes in Islam, then it's good enough for any Muslim. And when the preacher said this, he was doing nothing more than repeating what's in the Quran. But of course, nobody ever says, well, you know, that is a hateful thing. The Quran is a book of hatred, a book of violence, a book of misogyny, and there's no place for it in a civilized society. That's what should be said, but of course nobody wants to say that, because the minute you start speaking up against Islam or speaking up against Muslims, you're likely to have a Muslim mob baying for your blood. So it's cowardice, it's moral cowardice on behalf of the people who ought to be leading us out of this problem, they're not doing anything of the sort. They're just letting the problem get worse and worse and worse. And patriots like Paul Golding, who put their necks on the line in order to bring this to the attention of the British public, they're the ones that are getting punished.
Yeah, because another article that I pulled off the Liberty GB website was in this article about Paul Golding, mentions a Labour minister, Louise Hugh. She wants to have Britain First, a legally constitutional political party, to be described as a terrorist organization and banned from participating in elections.
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of people on the left in the Labour Party in this country who do not like the concept of free speech whatsoever. They're very happy to have free speech for their own causes, their own pet causes, but the minute that somebody speaks out against their own pet causes, then yes, they're racists and bigots and Islamophobes, and they should be proscribed, and they shouldn't be allowed to stand in elections. I mean, I'm sure that charge will be levelled at Liberty GB, because as time goes on, more and more people will start to see how much of a problem there is with Islam. They'll look around to see who's speaking out against it, and they will see Liberty GB, and they will join up, and eventually Liberty GB will become a major force in British politics, and will be subjected to the same treatment. I mean, at the moment, it's not as bad as it might be, but I can certainly see if the political scene does not change, and we're hamstrung by political correctness for very much longer, it's going to be harder and harder for organisations like Liberty GB to get out there and speak against Islam. You know, it will be, I'm quite sure, it will be looked on as just criticising Islam will be looked on as hate speech. And of course, when that happens, we're going to have the one tool that we can use to effectively counter Islam. That's going to be taken away from us. So we've got to fight that tooth and nail as hard as we can. But of course, we're a bit like the canary in the coal mine over here, because we've got maybe, 5 or 6% of Muslims in the population over here. Where you are in America, you've got a much lower percentage. But you can look at what happens in Europe, and you can say, if we allow it to go on any further, we're going to end up like Europe's going. I mean, even we in the UK are not as badly affected as some other countries. Holland and Sweden and France and Germany, of course, have got much worse problems, and the reason their problems are worse is because they've got more Muslims, because the amount of problems is directly proportional to the amount of Muslims you have in the population.
Yeah. Now, my mind went into about 15 different directions as you were talking, because now Germany just had that terrorist attack. The guy that drove the lorry into the marketplace, and as I saw, the death count right now is up to 12, and somewhat close to 60 or some odd are still injured badly. And then you had also another attack in Zurich. They had the ambassador to Turkey from Russia. He was assassinated. And as we're getting closer to Christmas, we're seeing more and more and more attacks. But at the same time, the UN has a resolution 1618 they're trying to bring forward, where they talk about exactly what we're afraid of, taking away your ability to criticize Islam.
Oh, yeah. Well, the United Nations, of course, is rapidly becoming an organisation that is unfit for human consumption, to use a phrase that I had used a little earlier. The UN has been thoroughly compromised by Islamic interests. I think there are, how many countries? There's 50-odd countries that have formed a coalition within the UN called the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation, and they're the ones that are pushing forward Resolution 1618. And as you say, if it ever gets passed and it ever gets enshrined in law in the various countries that are signatories to the UN, then we've all got a problem, because we won't be able to speak out against Islam, even about truthful things. I mean, let's not forget that when we speak out against Islam, we're always telling the truth. The Quran says what it says, the Hadith says what it says, the Reliance of the Traveller says what it says, and the Reliance of the Traveller, which describes the application of Sharia, that's one of the most revered books from Al-Azhar University in Cairo, which is a very highly thought of Islamic university. So all these things say what they say. You know, when we say Islam condones violence, we're not just saying it because we're prejudiced or bigoted or Islamophobic. We're saying it because this is what it says in the Quran. When Quran chapter 860 tells Muslims that they must make ready all their steeds of war in order to fight the unbeliever, they don't mean that they've got to go out and give an unbeliever a hug. You know, when Quran chapter 9 verse 29 talks about killing infidels, or Quran chapter 47 verse 4 talks about striking their necks, they are actually talking about killing unbelievers just because they're unbelievers. And anybody who says, well, that isn't true, is lying to you. So we're out there telling the truth. And if we get that ability taken away from us, then, the world's going to be in for a very, very tough time indeed. But like you say, coming up to Christmas, I'm absolutely certain these won't be the last attacks in Europe before Christmas. I'm sorry to say it, but all the signs are that the Islamic population in Europe have got plenty more things planned for us infidels, and none of them are good. So the signs are not there. And if you juxtapose the two things and say, well, on the one hand, you've got all these attacks going on the other hand, you've got the United Nations Resolution 1618. It does seem very perverse. But of course, there's a lot of political correctness at play. There's a lot of leftist interests at play, because the leftists have a view that if they can only overturn all the Judeo-Christian civilizational values, it would be so much easier for them to gain power and rule over us with an iron fist, much like Stalin did in the 1940s in Russia, Soviet Russia. But I think we while we still can speak out against Islam, it's our duty to do so. You know, we owe it to our children and grandchildren. And personally, I'm never going to stop, and I'm quite sure that most of the people listening in the chat room, they'll feel exactly the same way. And I'm sure people like yourself, Annie, and Curtis and Kel, who present the other counter-jihad radio shows, they're all of one mind. You know, this is an evil that has to be fought in order to effectively to save humanity. You know, it might sound a bit over the top to say that, but nothing short of our Western civilization is at stake here. And if we lose, everybody is going to be the poorer for it.
Oh, that's the truth. I think Germany has buyer's remorse with Angela Merkel. Go ahead, Curtis.
I love that, buyer's remorse. Angela Merkel, quite honestly, she should be strung up and tarred and feathered and hung from a lamppost, quite honestly. What she's done is nothing short of treason. And to allow 1.5-2 million Muslims into a country like Germany, it's just asking for trouble. I mean, she was on television only today saying that if we find that it was one of our beloved migrants who we've offered refugee status to in Germany, if we find it's one of them that's behind this attack, we're all going to be very sorry. And she was really understating it. Very sorry. Is that all you're going to say about it? And Geert Wilders of the Nationalist Party in Holland tweeted a picture of Merkel with blood on her hands, and I'm sure more and more Germans are realising that she's made a huge mistake in allowing all these people to come into the country. Yeah, buyer's remorse. That about sums it up. That's a wonderful phrase, that is. I hope you don't mind if I steal it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Curtis.
Do you think we need a new modern-day crusade?
Well, a crusade is a very loaded term, because of course, if you look back in the history of the Crusades, they were a response to 400 years of Muslim aggression, and the Crusades have been depicted as entirely the fault of us. Infidels deciding to pick a fight with Muslims and going over to the Middle East and causing trouble when the reverse is the case. Well, I guess you don't need me to tell you, of course. The problem is if you use the word crusade, because it's such a loaded term, it's going to automatically turn Muslims against the rest of humanity. What we really want to do is to make them see the error of their ways, because at the end of the day, you get plenty of Muslims who stand up and who say, well, I don't believe in all this terrorism and so on, and it should be pointed out to them that if that's the case, they shouldn't be Muslims. They shouldn't describe themselves as Muslims, because in order to be a true Muslim, you have to believe in the Quran in its entirety. And if you can't cherry pick. If you're going to be a devout Muslim, you have to believe everything, and that means believing in the 109 verses that call for death to the infidel. So to say that I'm a Muslim but I don't agree with all this terrorism is actually a logical inconsistency, and that I think is what needs to be brought home to people, that they're not going to be welcome in our country if they support an ideology that preaches a divine command of war towards the infidel, as Islam does. But of course, once you start putting labels on it, you've got to be very careful with the meanings that people ascribe to these labels. And I'm not at this moment sure that the label of crusade is going to be a helpful one in order to wage the fight that we have to wage. I mean, I certainly see in many respects that there are similarities between the Crusades of 1,000 years ago and what we are going to have to do now in order to solve the problem that we've got. But I think language is very important with the fight that we have on our hands at the moment, and you've got to be. I'll give you an example of how important language is, right? If you say to any Muslim, well, we in Western society, we believe in the concepts of peace and tolerance and justice and so on, he'll say, oh, that's fantastic, so do we. Only what happens is when you delve into it a little more deeply, and most people don't do this, but if you delve into it a little more deeply, you find that the phrases peace and tolerance and justice mean something quite different to Muslims than they do to us. So, for example, peace, we might say, is a sense of harmony and living together as equals and, tolerating each other's differences and so on. But that's not what peace means to a Muslim. Peace is the wonderful state of affairs that will come about when every last non-Muslim has either been killed or converted or subjugated to Islamic rule, and that's quite different from what we would understand. And the same is true of justice. I mean, we have an objective standard for justice, but as far as Muslims are concerned, justice is something that advances Islam. And if it doesn't advance the cause of Islam, then it's injustice. So the words actually mean things that are quite different, and that's what I mean about using a word like crusade. We might say, oh, so and so is on a crusade to do something positive. I mean, it could be like, you know, a goal at work or any number of things that you do in your own life. You might say, well, I'm on a crusade to get this done, and it means you're going to attack it with single-mindedness. And in that respect, you know, that's a positive thing. But Muslims wouldn't hear it that way. They would see it as an all-out war on every Muslim. And at the moment, I don't think that would be... I don't think we're quite at the point where we have to use words of that nature, because they will unnecessarily inflame the situation. I know. In a way, it sounds like I'm trying to weasel out of it, but I'm just trying to make the point that there are better ways, in my view, to argue the case for what you're doing. I mean, when I say I'm on a crusade, if you like, in order to bring to everybody's attention the problems that there are with Islam. Now, I'm just using it as an example because I think that's a positive thing to do. And I certainly am trying to make everybody aware of the problems that Islam has. And I'm hoping that in due course enough people will become sufficiently aware that we'll start as a civilization to take effective steps in order to protect ourselves against something which is absolutely steamrolling over us at the moment, because we're afraid to speak up and name it for what it is. I'm just think that if you start to throw in words like crusade right at the start of this process, you'll actually set back your own cause, because you'll be unnecessarily alienating people who might not, at this stage, might not want to be associated, or might not want to be in a position where they're having to side with one group or another. As I say this, I can see philosophical arguments being lined up against me, which is fine. You know, I don't mind that. But I just think that using a word like crusade, because it's so loaded, might actually be counterproductive.
I just know there are times that they refer to the West as crusaders.
Oh yeah, I mean they use language all the time. Which is, yeah, they do, and they use language all the time to describe us in the most derogatory manner. I mean, kuffar, the word kuffar is an extremely offensive word to Muslim ears. I mean, we hear it and we say, oh, you know, those cheeky chappies, they're calling us kuffar again, and we have a good old laugh about it. But to Muslim ears, there is nothing worse than being a kuffar. You know, kuffar is the most evil creature on the face of the earth. I think it's Quran chapter 98 verse 6 that talks about unbelievers being the most vile of creatures. And of course the corollary to that is Quran chapter 3 verse 110, where it says that Muslims are the best of people. So they certainly see themselves in those terms. The Quran divides the world into two and makes it very much us and them. I mean, that's one of the whole points about Quran, the Islam not being a religion, because it doesn't follow the golden rule. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, means that effectively you don't divide the world into two. You treat everybody as your brother, and you try and treat them all as equals in perpetuity. You know, you don't try and kill people just because they disagree with what you happen to think. I mean, obviously, if they attack you with the intention of killing you, then that's something different altogether. But by and large, we try not to we try not to alienate people who we want to see as our brothers. But Muslims don't have those inhibitions, and as you say, they do describe us in the most unsavoury terms.
Wow. Recently I saw an Amazon commercial on TV, and my husband was watching it with me, and I turned around and I says, Yanni, did you see that? Did you see what Amazon's doing? He goes, what was wrong with the commercial? The commercial starts off with a delivery to a house, and the door opens. It's a Catholic priest. He takes the package. It says Amazon. Next shot is a rabbi, not a rabbi. Oh, good Lord. Please forgive me, all my Jewish friends. I didn't mean to say rabbi. Please forgive me. An imam, a Muslim imam, opens the door, takes the Amazon package. And then the next thing you see, they go into their religious buildings, one being the Catholic Church, the other one being a mosque. And you see them come up, walking down the aisle, first the priest, and then the shot of the imam. And then you see now the priest is kneeling in prayer, and the Muslim is also kneeling in prayer, touching his head to the floor. The message in Amazon was saying is that Islam and Christianity are equal religions. They do the same thing. See, the priest takes a package, the imam takes a package. The priest goes to his house of worship, the imam goes to his house of worship. The priest kneels in prayer, this is a good thing. The imam kneels in prayer, this is a good thing. So Islam is as good and wholesome as Christianity.
Well, that's the fifth column agenda. That's the fifth column agenda right there. And that this is the pushing of the issue of Christendom. That commercial, that Amazon commercial, when I saw it, I was so assaulted. I thought I was going to throw my computer through the window. Then I realized that it's not my poor computer's fault. And I actually like my computer. But yeah, Annie, I found that highly, highly offensive indeed.
Tim?
Well, as Kel says, yeah, it is part of the fifth column, well, politically correct agenda that would have us all believe that there is an equivalence between Christianity and Islam. Now, the problem is that it's all too easy to look at the religious aspects and say, oh, well, the Christian guy is praying, the Muslim guy is praying. Oh, that's wonderful. So they're obviously the same things. But of course, what they don't say is what they don't go into is the ideology behind each of those acts, and how when a Christian prays, he does so for the good of all of humanity. When a Muslim prays, he does so for the good of Islam, and not for the good of humanity at all. The prayer that a Muslim recites about 17 times a day actually it refers to Jews and Christians being on the wrong path, and only the Muslims are on the right path, and it's the duty of every devout Muslim to make the Christians and Jews see the error of their ways, even if that is at the point of the sword. Of course, Amazon doesn't say that. It leaves you with a completely false impression that these two acts of worship are somehow equivalent, and they're not. But then, most people don't think about it in depth. They just see this picture and they think, oh yeah, why are we being so nasty to these poor little Muslims? They're just like us, really. It's extremely misleading. Kel refers to it as a fifth column agenda, which I think is a really good description, because it's designed to make us believe something that isn't true. And if we allow ourselves to be duped by the false premise that Islam is somehow a religion that's equivalent to Christianity, we're all going to come unstuck. That is to say, all us non-Muslims are eventually going to come unstuck because they are not equivalent. And as you know, what I was saying before about Islam not being a religion at all, if we can actually bring these points out in a court of law and have it explained that in legal terms, Islam should not be classified as a religion because it doesn't meet the criteria in law. I mean, that's not so very different from what we talk about in philosophical terms when we say Islam doesn't follow the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule has been in use for thousands of years so that men can tell the difference between a philosophical belief system and a religion. And if it follows the Golden Rule, then you can classify it as a religion, and if it doesn't, then you can't. And this is being conveniently overlooked by people who promote Islam. But of course, what they won't be able to overlook, if we get it in a court of law and we say, look, the criteria for a religion is not being observed in the case of Islam in law, then that's quite a different thing altogether. If we can get a ruling on that, then that would be tremendous. You've got the situation now where companies like Amazon, who are hugely influential, are allowed to get away with propaganda that would make Goebbels he'd be very envious. It would make him extremely envious if he could see Goebbels, of course, being Hitler's Minister of Propaganda. It would make him very envious if he could see what Amazon are doing today, through the power of television, manipulating the feelings of people in a way, and to promote this false premise. So yeah, Kel's absolutely right when she says that.
Well, Kel, you posted another YouTube video up in the chat room. What's that about?
Oh, that's the one you were discussing. It's the priest and the imam, and they're being delivered their knee pads so that they can kneel on their respective prayer mats. That's the one that I threw in the chat room.
Because you had, I don't remember them sitting down with a cup of tea. I must have walked out of the room because I was so pissed.
That's just how it's labeled on the YouTube channel, Amazon's YouTube channel. But surprise, 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 comments are disabled for this video. I wonder why Annie and Curtis and Tim.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Not very surprising.
Well, that's like the day after that Gold Star father that Trump had criticized. The very next day, all of his websites were taken down, and any connection he had on the internet to the Muslim Brotherhood was whitewashed, was cleared out. So, of course, now Trump takes heat for criticizing Gold Star father, who is actually working against his poor dead son. You know, this is crazy. We're not allowed to turn around and say, hey, listen, you know, this is wrong. You can't promote Islam if you're going to promote sex slaves and subjugation and conquering. And not here in the United States. It's just not done. But no one wants to open up their mouth. Tim?
Well, I agree. It's the same over here in the UK. I mean, we value tolerance and politeness and accommodating others very, very highly. But we demonstrate these values to a fault, because it only really works if people, by and large, have got mutual goodwill with us. You know, you can put up with a few minor differences, but by and large, as long as you've got goodwill towards your fellow man, then you can allow people to, have their differences, and we can still more or less rub along together and everything's fine. But with Islam, of course, you cannot make that assumption. Muslims do not have the goodwill towards the rest of us that we need in order to make our civilization work. Our entire civilization is predicated on this goodwill that we have as members of humanity, equal members of humanity. We have this goodwill towards each other, and of course, if you've got one side that doesn't have that goodwill, they will take advantage of everybody else, and that's what's happening now. And nobody wants to say, well, hold on a minute, let's make this a bit more of a level playing field by putting Muslims at a bit of a disadvantage so that they can't do what they're doing, because people on the left say, oh, well, that's discrimination, and discrimination is always bad. Of course, that isn't true. Discrimination can be good. In fact, the dictionary definition of discrimination is being able to tell one thing from another. And sometimes you need to be able to tell one thing from another in order to survive. When I first started coming onto the Blog Talk Radio, I used the analogy of a Stone Age hunter going out from his cave one day, carrying his club, looking for something to eat, and he goes around one corner and he's confronted with a saber-toothed tiger. Now, if he can't tell the difference between the saber-toothed tiger and the cute little pussycat that he might have kept as a pet in his cave, he's not going to last very long. And discrimination under those terms, where your survival is at stake, is a good thing. But of course, the left doesn't want you to think like that. The left wants you to think that any kind of discrimination is wrong, and they'll do whatever they can to stop it from happening. But going back to what you were saying with that advertisement from Amazon, I think you've got you've really got to be more discriminating in how you approach the subjects of Islam and Christianity. There are too many people out there who draw the equivalence, but in fact Islam has got much more in common with totalitarian regimes such as Nazism and communism than it does with genuine religions like Judaism and Christianity. And I call Judaism and Christianity genuine religions because they follow the Golden Rule. They believe that everybody should be treated as equals, and as long as you have that goodwill in a society based on Judeo-Christian values, you're not going to go far wrong. But when you introduce people who don't have that goodwill, you have to recognise that you're going to be in for a lot of trouble unless you make a special case, otherwise known as discrimination. But that is what we're going to have to do. We are going to have to make a special case for Islam, because if we don't, they will continue to steamroller all over us, and they will destroy our civilization in the same way that they have destroyed, Islam has destroyed multiple civilizations in the last 1400 years. I could give you lots of examples. That would take a whole show on its own. But I think we need really to be thinking about exactly how we should be describing Islam and what we should consider acceptable in our civilized society, because at the moment we're accepting things that are going to lead to its destruction.
Oh, someone sounds hungry back there.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's a dog in the background. I'll just mute myself when I'm not talking.
Oh, well, Curtis, ask the question anyway and see if Kel can answer.
Okay. I was just wondering if the Queen or anybody in the royal family ever expressed their views on the Muslim problem in England.
Very interesting. The Queen is a figurehead. Queen Elizabeth II, she is really not privy to speak about political issues per se, despite the fact that she does have a weekly meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and they go over policy, but they really don't speak about the issues of Islam in particular. However, that doesn't mean that they don't have opinions, and I know that Queen Elizabeth is very, very concerned about the migrant issue happening in Europe, and she's very concerned about it spilling over into the United Kingdom. The Queen Elizabeth has absolutely no use for this religiosity. However, her son, Prince Charles, he is a little different. He is at one point he was embracing the ideology of Chrislam, and that caused a lot of distress within the United Kingdom and, of course, in Canada, because Queen Elizabeth is also the Queen of Canada. We were quite concerned about that, and that went away very, very quickly. But no, as far as protocol goes, Curtis, no. The royal family, they do not air public opinions about the issues of Islam, nor any other religion for that matter.
Cal, recently I seem to remember something going on with Prince Harry, that he went there for some sort of award ceremony or whatever it was, and whoever the head person was of this whole thing had him standing on stage and made a statement that you could clearly see Prince Harry was completely uncomfortable with. And I think it had to do with Islam. Do you remember what was going on with that?
It could be. Is that Prince Harry, he does a lot of military junk as well. He is a military man, same with his brother. And they do a lot of tours, and they speak about issues within the military. And I think he was caught on the hop, asked a question about how to deal with Islam, and you're right, he was clearly uncomfortable with that, and he sticks with his royal protocol, like I say. And it's very difficult, though, because these are, despite the fact that they are quote-unquote figureheads, they are all the same quite influential. And so when they are put in a position such as that, it's very difficult for them. It is a reason why that reporters and speakers and so on are very carefully vetted. Nobody is censored. Nobody is censored. But because of the unique role of the royal family, people do have to be vetted and how they're going to address the royal family if they have the opportunity to do so directly. This one individual, he kind of got under their radar. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you and I, Kel, last night were talking about this one. This article was from Fox News, believe it or not. Exclusive. Families of the Orlando nightclub shooting victims sue Facebook, Twitter, and Google. Families of the victims of the Orlando gay nightclub shooting on Monday filed a federal lawsuit against Twitter, Facebook, and Google for providing material support to the Islamic State and helping to radicalize shooter Omar Mateen. And in the complaint filed in Eastern District of Michigan, the families of Tivia Crosby, Javier Jorge Reyes, and Juan Ramon Guerrero argue that the three web platforms provided terrorist groups ISIS with accounts they use to spread extremist propaganda, raise funds, and attract new recruits. Comment, Kel.
Well, good luck with all that. It sounds like it's a class action. If that's the case, it will have legs for sure. But the end result, what will the end result be with this? I don't know if Twitter, Google, Facebook, I don't know how they will respond to this. We don't even know if they've been filed the papers yet. But I certainly do understand why the families of the people killed in the Pulse nightclub have sued Twitter, Alphabet, Google, Facebook. I just find it amazing, though, that nothing may come of it. I don't know. Annie, I'm just looking at the article now, and there are families of 3 men who were killed at Orlando's Pulse, a gay nightclub. Like I say, though, I don't know if this is going to have legs. It would certainly have to be addressed. If they could get a class action lawsuit, I should say, that would probably be much more effective. That's all I can say about it.
Well, we could probably make it a class action lawsuit if you say any victim of Islamic terrorism that is found definitely to be Islamic terrorism should join in the class action suit. Because now you got the families of all the victims in San Bernardino. You've got the Fort Hood. You've got, what was that recent one in Ohio? We can go all the way back to the Boston bomber, 9/11, or the first bombing of the World Trade Center. We can go back to the hijacking of the Kilo Loro. So, yeah, that would make one hellacious lawsuit against those 3 social media sites.
Now, wasn't there an issue where the families of the 9/11 victims, they wanted to file a class action lawsuit against Saudi Arabia, but there was some sort of legalese thrown in there that case would not be allowed to be heard because it was never proven that Saudi Arabia, for example, was complicit in the 2001 9/11 attacks. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure that was the case.
I'm pulling up the article now. There was legislation that was recently passed. It was a bill allowing 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia, became law, and what is this bill? Come on, open up. Do they give you the bill number? It passed. I don't want sound. House of Representatives passed it. Oh, no. Don't want that to play. Stop. All right. The House of Representatives voted it against the veto just hours after the Senate rejected it, meaning that the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act will become law. And so, yes, now they can. Now they can.
Yeah, that's right. Because I believe it was Barack Hussein Obama. He tried to veto a bill that would allow lawsuits against Saudi Arabia. And yes, that was overruled. Right you are, Annie. Right on. Woohoo!
Good memory I have. just don't tell my husband that.
Obama lost that one.
Curtis.
Oh no! My screen just froze up. Oh no! My studio just froze up. I can't believe this. What the heck? I can't touch anything. Oh man! Cal, take over until I can get myself back up here.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas with our internet.
I cannot get back in. Unbelievable. Oh, here we no. Yes, no.
So Cal, what do you think of the electoral votes yesterday?
Fantastic. It's a done deal, people. It's a done deal. And snowflakes, get over it. President-elect Trump is in. But I was rather concerned, Curtis, about one aspect of this, is that I understand that there were some that were wanting to hold out and not honor their duty and obligation to recognize the college vote. Is that I believe I read that yesterday, in fact, that there were going to be some holdouts after all. And I don't know if this has to do with the business with, what is her name? The Green Party freak show, and Hillary Clinton, and that they wanted vote recounts and everything like that. What is her name? Oh, it'll come to me in a moment.
Well,
but I can see. Yes.
But I do know 2 people defected on Trump's side, and I think Hillary had about 5 people.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm not sure if there was 2 people. I know definitely was one in Texas, but at the final count wasn't 2 people short. I think he was just 1 short, unless you read an article I missed.
Yeah, it was 2. I think one was in Wisconsin.
But the 5 that defected from Hillary. The 5 that defected from Hillary.
Yeah, 5 for Hillary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Hillary's.
Oh, I did.
Loses again.
Yeah, but they didn't vote for Trump. They didn't vote for Trump. I think 2 of them went for Kasich, and others did some weird name write-ins. But even Trump did not get it, and yet he still trounced straight. So, Donald Trump, our next president of the United States. So it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to go on with that.
Yeah. Didn't the Beatles come out with a song called "I'm a Loser"?
Baby, why don't you kill me?
I'm a loser.
And I don't know what Jill Stein was thinking that she would accomplish with this, the Green Party dudette I was thinking about earlier. But Bigfoot just put in a very interesting comment in that he said, a Washington state elector betrayed Hillary and voted for Faith Spotted Eagle.
Yes.
This means Miss Eagle is the first Native American to get the electoral vote.
Yeah, 2 people.
I think 2 of her people voted for Colin Powell.
2 of them.
Too.
Yeah. Oh man, it just gets funny, and you watch the meltdown on the left, and they're still trying to figure out the reason why Hillary lost. How about because she's a crook?
Exactly.
Oh man,
there was an interesting article, speaking of this, that just came out. I believe it was yesterday, in fact, and it is pertaining to, there is a judge that is ordering the release of some of those servers, a federal judge in Manhattan. What's his name? Kevin Castell. He's of the United States District Court, and he ordered yesterday that documents be posted on the court's docket as of noon today to release some of the emails. And, of course, those emails, the ones that were discovered by the FBI during the unrelated investigation of our favorite hot dog, Anthony D. Weiner, and his wife, Uma Abedin. He's a wiener. But this is going to be very interesting developments. Now, the thing is, if these emails are indeed released, they could be redacted, and who knows how heavily they'll be redacted. But all the same, it sounds like this could be very, very harmful to Miss Clinton. But we have to wait and see what happens with Barack Hussein Obama, peace be upon his pointy head, as to whether or not, if anything develops from this, if Obama's going to give her a pardon.
Well, there was an unclassification of a large number of those emails. I don't know if they're the same ones that the judge ordered to be unsealed, but when Fox News had it up there, they did a story on it earlier today, and it caught my eye because I was amazed that they were unclassified. So if they were unclassified, there will be no redaction in them, which means the entire document can be released. And out of that, 29 emails that were on Anthony Weiner's computer, who has no clearance. He's not even part of the government any longer. There was absolutely zero reason for anything to be on his computer, but Uma Abedin uploaded them, and 29 of them were highly classified documents. Boom. We got it.
There you go. This is interesting, too, is that Justice Department lawyer Jenny L. Needler said the government objected to the unsealing request. Oh, surprise. But Judge Castile made it clear that he was leaning towards releasing the materials with some redactions. He asked the government to provide the documents and proposed redactions to him under seal. Huh. Well.
The plot gets thicker.
We're making ourselves quite an interesting stew here.
The plot gets thicker. And it's just, how many days? 5 days to Christmas? Oh, boy. There's going to be a lot of good Christmas presents under the tree.
Oh, yes.
I could see Obama pardoning his close friends since yesterday. He pardoned like 280-something people one day. And I believe it's the largest count ever by president in one day.
Oh, unreal, Kurt.
I don't think he's going to leave his friend Hillary hanging.
Man, do we have Tim back yet, or is he still playing with his little puppy dog?
No, I'm here. It's all quiet in the Burton household at the moment. I do apologise for that. That little round of talking. Well, it's one of the downfalls of not working out of a soundproof studio. But hey, it's Blog Talk Radio, so nobody, I hope, is going to object too much. I was interested to hear what you were saying about the election, and of course, I'm sure we're all very pleased to see that Donald Trump has now been securely put in place the electoral votes. I agree that Hillary Clinton's share of popular vote had actually gone up to about 2.8 million. But when you consider that probably about 2.6 million of those were probably dead people, I guess they're not going to make too much fuss about the result. Just one thing I'd like to throw in. When it comes to all the predictions that were made on the run-up to the election, excuse me, one of the people I was following quite extensively was a blogger by the name of Scott Adams, and you can see his work on Scott Adams' blog. I think it's scottadamsblog.com. Now he's quite an unlikely pundit, but he's actually the guy who writes the Dilbert cartoons, and you think, well, what's that guy doing getting involved in politics? But in fact, he's looking at the political situation from quite a different point of view compared to everybody else. He's a trained hypnotist, and he's looking at the entire political process through the filter of persuasion, which is what he says is what makes people do things, rather than responding to facts and reason and logic. He actually predicted pretty much most of the the electoral cycle leading up to the election itself, that Donald Trump would win by a landslide. Excuse me. And that is in fact how it turned out. And a lot of people were very surprised at how well Donald Trump did, but Scott Adams says, well, it wasn't really that surprising if you take the persuasion filter into account. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but anybody who's interested, take a look at Scott Adams' blog. Excuse me. over the past 18 months because he was posting 3 or 4 items a week on the run-up to the election. And it really does make it interesting reading. I know the election has come and gone now, but if you want a good example of why he was right 80 to 90% of the time, and most other pundits in the United States were wrong 80 to 90% of the time, you could do a lot worse and have a look at Scott Adams' blog. But I'll leave it at that and pass the microphone back because I'm coughing a bit, so I'll pass it back.
Oh, man. I went onto Scott Adams' website for the Dilbert cartoon when he was making the predictions for Trump winning. Now, mind you, Scott Adams is a liberal. He is not a conservative. He's not a Republican. I believe he's a registered Democrat. But he did predict correctly that Trump would win, and his logic was sound. You know, everything he said about that was extremely interesting. But the fact was he was not happy and not supporting Trump. So just when you read his stuff, keep that in mind. And Ron just put down...
I was going to say, I do remember reading on one of his blog articles, he says, at this point in the electoral cycle, he said, which was probably a couple of months before the election, he says, I'm going to be supporting Hillary Clinton as Democrat because, he said, it's dangerous where I live, it's dangerous to do anything else, which sort of sums it all up, really, doesn't it? You know, people... are so devoid of principle on the left of the political spectrum that they will actually physically harm you if they think that you're going to be voting for the opposition. But yeah, it was an interesting exercise in prediction and persuasion, and that's I try and bring it to the attention of people because. He's probably the only person in America who had that success rate with his predictions. And that's why I thought it was interesting.
It was very interesting. It is good reading, but just when you do read it, remember that this is coming from a liberal. And yet, maybe Trump will end up converting some of those middle-of-the-road Democrats and those that think they're liberal, that in reality they're not. We'll see what happens with Trump. He's got the first 2 years, he's got to put forward everything he needs to get, because the rest of his term he's going to be fighting to retain his seat if he goes up for re-election. So, again, it's going to be a long, bumpy ride, but saddle up, guys. Strap in. Strap in. Now, what is this article that Ron put in the chat room, Cal? Cal?
Well, this is really fascinating, and this comes from Clash Daily. And that Denmark has been duped. They have been conducting medical tests used to determine the age of child asylum seekers. And the results, of course, are jaw-dropping. A lot of us have spoken about this in the past, about using forensics to determine the actuality of age with these so-called refugees. Well, they're economic migrants, we know that. And results are coming out like you wouldn't believe. Now, the Danish Immigration Service, they suspected 800 migrants were lying about their age and asked the University of Copenhagen's Department of Forensic Medicine to run checks on them, and they did. They carried out tests involving X-ray of the teeth and bones, and it was revealed out of the 800, 600 of the refugees involved were actually adults. Now, these are people posing as children being put in foster homes to people. Now, in Denmark, unaccompanied child migrants have the right to a number of privileges under asylum law, including bringing their parents to the country. This is, well, quite fascinating. Is this one vetting process, Annie or Curtis or Tim, that we can use before you even walk out of the airport? You have to walk through a body scan, and we can determine your age, and we can turn you back. But yeah, Denmark, they were really getting fed up with the fact that all of these migrants coming in as unaccompanied minors were indeed not unaccompanied minors. And I'm surprised that the Immigration Services actually went along with this, because, as you know, wouldn't this be considered invasion? it would be considered invasive investigation into the authenticity of the individual. Would we not be violating their human rights? They're human beings. Oh, Annie, it's just amazing.
Oh, it is. It is. The bass-backward ways things are getting done. But this is where Donald Trump is correct in saying we've got to vet. We cannot let anyone over the border, whether it's to an airport, into a harbor port, or into over the border crossings. We don't. No. You don't come in until we verify exactly if you are who you claim to be. And simple tests can be done, or just a simple exam, even of your mouth, can determine what your actual age is. It's many simple ways. And if you want to come into the United States, then the prerequisite is that we make sure you are who you are. It's not an unreasonable search and seizure, because if you want to come in, then you're going to give us consent to do whatever medical test we have to do. That is prerequisite to enter the United States. So how is that an illegal search and seizure? It's not. It's not. I mean, would Mexico allow you in and let you work? No. You try to do that, you'll end up in a Mexican jail. So what is wrong with us enforcing our laws here? Current laws in the books work if they are enforced. Very plain and simple. Very plain and simple. But yet, Curtis, no one listens. No one listens at all.
No, they don't. And their reason is it's just not the way we do things here in America.
Well,
we have to be forgiving and understanding and just let people come in because that's the right thing to do. That's the warped mentality of the left, and it's going to get this country in deep trouble if we don't turn it around in the next 2 years. And I think we can.
Well, let's hope we can. Now, I think I caught Tim's throat. Now I'm the one that's got the scratchy throat and coughing.
I'm sorry about that.
You gave me your cooties.
I tell you one thing, I will not miss that phrase. This is not who we are.
Amen to that.
Oh, man.
Right on, Curtis. Yep.
Oh, jeez. It's funny because you watch these people that are, still crying a month and a half after the election, and Hillary Clinton came up with another excuse of why she didn't win the election. They just don't get it. You lost. Face it, Flounder. This is the way things are going to be for the next 4 years. You said in your face to us 8 years ago. We are now our turn to say in your face. Face it and accept it.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that jumped out at me was when she went on to that TV program and said at this point, she said, I should be 50 points ahead. And she looked like she was absolutely physically, mentally certifiable when she said that.
Oh, yeah.
It gave me the creeps, and I'm not easily affected in that way, but it really did give me the creeps. Of course, ever since the election, we've had counselling programs in universities for those poor students who have been traumatised by the thought of a Trump victory. One of the things I was talking to Kel about just before we came online was Breitbart, the news organisation. They're doing some Christmas special offers, and one of them is a little snowflake pin that you can get. It's in the shape of a snowflake, and it says on it, "You're very precious. Love from Breitbart." And I just thought that was wonderful. But, yeah, there's a lot of people out there who are traumatised.
Oh, man. Matter of fact, you mentioned The Clash earlier, Kel, which is run by Doug Giles. And guess who our guest?
Right. Yeah.
Our guest is on Friday. Drum roll.
He's back.
Yeah. For people that were looking for Doug the last time, he and his wife had wiped out on their mountain bikes and got pretty banged up and beat up. So that is why we missed him earlier this month. He was supposed to be on the 13th, but instead he'll be on the 24th with us. And it's going to be an interesting show because we have this young kid. I think he's 20, 21 or something like that. His name is Hunter Avalon. Yeah, people can Google his name. Last name is spelled Avonllone. And he's got all these fantastic videos where he's yelling at his fellow millennials, kids his age, and he's yelling at them, telling them to grow up and grow a pair. His videos are awesome. They're funny, they're informative, and yet he calls to task all these kids that need their safe zone. Oh no, Donald Trump is elected and I'm going to hide in my bedroom for the next 4 years. I'm not coming out. I'm going to be on a hunger strike. Or where's my safe zone? Oh, no, Professor can't tell me that I have to look up who George Washington is because he's one of those evil people that held slaves. I'm gonna have a heart attack here. So I called this kid up. He has never done a radio interview, as I understand it. Sue had sent me his video, and I immediately reached out to him, spoke to him on the phone. So I'm going to put that page up so we can have everyone, hook up and say, yeah, I want to make sure I get on that show with Doug Giles from The Clash and Hunter Avalon. Oh, it's going to be a pisser, Kel. An absolute pisser.
It is fantastic. I'm looking at the Facebook feed because I find Facebook as equally fascinating some days. And a lot of people are talking about the electoral college vote and the results. And my friend Ron, he posted, okay, folks, we are done with all the whining and blaming, right? Trump has won the election twice. Are you stupid or just spoiled brats that can't deal? Return all those trophies you didn't earn.
Oh, good one, Ron. A real good one. I'm looking down. We're down to our last 8.5 minutes here. The show went really fast, and I'm glad, Tim, you were able to join us, because I understand you were having problems with your computer and Skype. But I'm glad you made it here, and I hope you get rid of that cold.
Yeah, well, yesterday was terrible. I couldn't get onto the internet at all yesterday. It seems to have improved a bit today, but it seems to have had an effect on my voice, whatever it was. Probably me shouting at the computer yesterday has caused this problem. But yeah, it's a great pleasure being on the show. And I do hope I'll be able to come back in the future. That's if you'll have me. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Well, Tim, I'll let you know because on the chat room there is the show page is a link to libertygb.org.uk, and people can go on there and if they want, make a donation to your defense fund. So when people check in the archives, they'll see it too. Yes. So we've got to get that money to Fuzzy Bullocks.
That would be that would be absolutely great. If you can help at all, it would be much appreciated. It's quite an expensive business taking the Crown Court route, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, to be honest. It's not for the faint-hearted, but somebody's got to stand up and do it. And if we don't make a stand for our children and grandchildren, they're going to look back on us and say, why didn't you when you could have done? Why didn't you, Granddad, when you were in the war against Islam? Why didn't you do more? And I'm going to make sure nobody in my family says that about me, because it's just too important to let go. So yeah, if anybody out there wants to help fight the good fight and they can spare a couple of dollars to my legal defence fund, it really would be much appreciated. So that's on the libertygb.org.uk website. So thank you very much for the plug there, Annie.
And Kel, there's a link over on the show page I put in so people can find your radio show, which is the Global Patriot Radio. So once they get done listening to this podcast, they then can go to BTR and pull up your show, the archives and all, for Global Patriot Radio. See, give you a plug too.
Absolutely.
Well, I think when it comes to Global Patriot Radio, I haven't been able to do as much there as I would have liked because my health issues have they've forced me to curtail the work I've been doing on the radio. But Kel is really the one who is doing all the sterling work on the Infidels Are Watching segment in Global Patriot Radio. Obviously, I'll help her. I'll support her as much as I can, but I just haven't had the chance in the past few months to do as much on the radio as I would have liked. But yeah, wonderful job, Kel.
And you know what, though, Tim? You join me when you can over there at RFB Radio as well, and you have a voice over there anytime, all the time, whenever you like. You know that for sure.
Oh, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And final plug for the day for my co-host Curtis C.S. Bennett. Go to his website, which is theoriginalradicals.com. Check out his books and check out all of his other writings there. Curtis, he's all over the place. We're working on your 24th book still. Once you get it done, you got to give me a copy and talk about that. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is Curtis, Kel, Tim. It has been an absolute pleasure to have all of you on there. I want to thank everyone that was all listening in on their smart devices and those who participated in the chat room, especially out to Sasquatch and Gulf Dog for doing that. And I'm going to end the show with a different song called American Heart by John Cain. I've got to see if I can get the Dirty Uncles to update that song so I can start using it for my closing again. So see you back here on Friday. See you all back here on Friday, and I wish you to be very careful out there. We've got a bad weather front coming through the areas, so just check it out, and see us back here on Friday. Same bat time, same bat station. Good night, and God bless.
I'm American made. I got American heart. I got American faith. An American heart. They say our reputation needs a new coat of paint and a delicate melody. But I say I'd like to prove it, 'cause the melody don't mean a thing if we don't have the strength to sing. And I won't be made to ever feel ashamed that I'm American made. I got American heart. I got American faith in America's heart. Go on, raise the flag. I got stars in my eyes. I'm in love with her, and I won't apologize. They say that we need changes as we fall the founding fathers seem to get it wrong. Oh, but I say that I still believe in greatest innovator, liberator, cultivator, freedom knows. So I suggest you take a look inside. Man, I think you changed already. You went and lost your pride. But I'm American made. I got American heart. I got American faith in America's heart. Go on, raise the flag.
90 seconds.
Stars in my eyes. I'm in love with her, and I won't apologize. Dress her up so you don't recognize her. She'll be there if you wake up in the night.
60 seconds.
Because a mother can always find her child. he's lost. I'm American made. I got American parts. I got American faith in America's heart. Go on, raise the flag. I got stars in my eyes. I'm in love with her, and I won't apologize. I'm in love with her, and I won't apologize.